Happy Women's Day. So I'm Marcia Nunes, and as Karen said, I am the merchandising manager for Google Play in Latin America. So what that means is I pick what apps and games and books and movies and music we feature in the region. And I'm also a movie producer. So is this better? Okay, I'll just lean into the mic. I'm also a movie producer. I just finished my first feature film and will be premiering at the Tribeca Film Festival in just over a month. So really exciting. Thank you. And I'm here to talk to you guys about how technology is changing the playing field for female content creators. And it's a pretty big topic, so I'm just going to focus. Better? Oh, great. Sorry, I can't really get a sense of how it's projecting from here. And this is good because now I can move around. I'm here to talk about how technology is changing the playing field for female content creators, and I'll just focus on film because that's what I know best. But most of this can apply to video games, music, publishing, etc. There's lots of cool ways that tech is acting as an equalizer in this really male-dominated field, but there's still lots of problems and lots of opportunities for disruption. So I'm here hoping that I will inspire some of you young engineers and maybe some of you engineers who are a little bored in what you're doing and want to change something that's changed to something else. I'm here that I'll inspire you to create some new solutions. So for those of you who don't know, women's representation in film, both behind the scenes and in the stories themselves, is really laughably low. I don't know if anybody watched the Oscars last weekend, but Cate Blanchett talked about this in her acceptance speech. She said, "To those of us in the industry who are still foolishly clinging to the idea that female films with women at the center are niche experiences, they are not. Audiences want to see them, and in fact, they earn money. The world is round, people." So let me just tell you guys a bit about the numbers to give you a sense of the issue that we're facing. Of the 250 top grossing films in the US in 2011, only 5% of them were directed by women, only 14% of them were written by women, and only 25% of the producers were women. So these numbers have fluctuated very little since 1998, which means that the traditional Hollywood model is a huge impediment to access for women filmmakers. And why is that? So trying to figure that out, last year the Sundance Institute and Women in Film did a study called Exploring the Barriers for Opportunities for Women Filmmakers. And they went through all these numbers, and they also interviewed hundreds of filmmakers to try and get a sense of the problems. And from this study, from these interviews, 5 main barriers to entry emerged. The first two go together, and they're gendered financial barriers and male-dominated networks. So what does this mean? That in movies, as in most other things, men control the money. So if the men are in charge of the funding sources and these male financiers are not as interested in women's stories are not getting funded and they're not getting seen. The other issue is that female-centric projects are perceived to lack commercial viability. So traditionally the assumption is that women will go watch Thor and the Avengers and other male-centered films, but men are not going to do the same thing for female-centered films. Now, last year, 2 of the biggest hits were Frozen, which is awesome, by the way, and The Hunger Games, obviously proving this wrong. Before that, you had Bridesmaids, you had Twilight, you have tons of examples that show that female-centric films do make money, but still, Hollywood sticks to the old assumptions and the slate skews highly male. So some of the other problems that female filmmakers are faced with is stereotyping on set, meaning that people don't think women can direct action scenes, even though Catherine Bigelow has been doing it for years, and people don't think females can direct huge crews full of men. Lack of work and family balance, which we know is an issue everywhere, and exclusionary hiring decisions. So Catherine Hardwicke, who's the director of the Twilight franchise, has spoken pretty openly about being denied studio jobs because they just wouldn't trust a woman with a project that's very large. And you guys might be thinking, well, I kind of like Thor, I kind of like Avengers, I think things in film are pretty good. Why should I work to change this? Why should I be creating platforms that will help female filmmakers? And I think that it's because if we consider our culture to be a reflection of who we are, to have a film culture without women's voices contributing a significant amount is a really limited reflection of who we are as a whole. And it's also a reflection, you can see this because in the top 250 movies, again, of 2011, only 11% of main characters were women. 78% were men. And in another study of over 900 movies, they found that violence, blood, gore, weapons, they were much less likely to be seen in a female-driven project, and thought-provoking topics were much more likely to be seen. And having women in lead positions in film also increases the overall number of women that are working on a project. So the Sundance Institute found that when a man directs a film, on average, 23% of the key positions, meaning producers, writers, editors, cinematographer, only 23% of those positions are held by women. When a woman directs a film, 44% of those roles are held by women. This is a much better ratio, and we're creating jobs for more women. So, what are some solutions to even the playing field? The same women that offered up the 5 barriers to entry also suggested the following: improving access to finance, mentoring and encouragement for early career women, and raising awareness of the problem, like I'm here doing today. So, how is tech helping to address some of these? Firstly, access to funding. We're all probably familiar with crowdfunding, where you fund or partially fund your project with support from your future audience, people who are already interested in the product. So Kickstarter is the big one that we've all heard of. There's also tons of other models. Kickstarter and Indiegogo mostly are rewards-based. People contribute in exchange for kind of prizes they don't expect to get their money back. There is Slated and IndieVest that are now, with the Jobs Act, raising money through crowdfunding, but for equity investments, so people do get their money back. And there's one called Cinecoop. That's kind of an audience participation American Idol film competition where people post trailers, the audience votes on them, and the best one gets funded by the company. And there's one called Seed and Spark, which is focused on female-driven films, and it's also a non-exclusive distribution platform. And they curate it so that you really have to prove to them that you can attract an audience, you have to prove your vision to them before they even let you start your crowdfunding, so it's pretty cool. There hasn't yet been a study of how many crowdfunded films are female-driven, and I would love to see those numbers because I think they will be much more equal than Hollywood films. But there's been some high-profile successes for women on these sites, and a big one is about to come out in theaters on March 14th, and that's Veronica Mars, which is a show starring Kristen Bell as a plucky student detective that was beloved by many, but watched by only 2.5 million people a week, which for Hollywood is not enough. So Warner Brothers canceled that show. And Kristen Bell and the show's creator went to Warner Brothers and they said, if we can raise $2 million on Kickstarter, will you make a movie of it? Warner Brothers said okay. And it was the largest film goal ever on Kickstarter at the time. They ended up raising $5.7 million from over 91,000 people. And the studio funded the rest of the movie, which only cost about $6 million, so Warner Brothers really got a good deal out of that, and now it's coming out in theaters. On a smaller scale, Jodie Foster just recently narrated a documentary about the first female director. It's called Be Natural, and that raised $219,000 on Kickstarter. And my movie raised $60,000 on Kickstarter, which was great, because without it, we would not have been able to get the production going on time, so we really needed that gap. Another huge development in way that tech is influencing the industry right now is the direct access to audience. So we all know there's a myriad of different platforms where you can watch content, and we're not relying on linear TV programming, so that basically means that we can watch what we want to watch when we want to watch it. In 2006, Chris Anderson wrote a book called The Long Tail. And the book is about how, with the rise of online distribution, there's going to be the demise of the hit-driven mindset, which for movies means those tentpole action movies. And what he was saying is that on stores like Google Play and iTunes and Amazon and Netflix, people can browse the infinite aisle. And that is a digital store with limitless inventory, means that you don't have to watch the blockbusters that are always in your face. You can watch via personalization and via merchandising, you can watch what actually interests you, not what the studios are telling you to watch. And you can see the proof of how this works and how our interests are actually very diverse in the way that money is now made in online distribution. So after the book came out, Reed Hastings, who's the CEO of Netflix, told Chris Anderson that Blockbuster made 90% of their revenue from new releases when they had physical stores. Netflix only relies on new releases for 30% of their revenue. So that means that people are actually looking for their true interest. They don't want to watch those movies. They want to watch different movies. And these are giving women more opportunities to get their content noticed. There's also lots of fun other platforms like Tug, which is a website that allows you to crowdfund to get your movie actually in a movie theater. So it usually costs about $5,000 to $20,000 to get into a movie theater if you're an independent filmmaker, and most people can't afford it. So there's certain online platforms that allow you to pre-sell those tickets so you can actually fund your theater run before you even get there, so there's much less of a risk. Going back to the need for mentoring and raising awareness, obviously we use social media to get the word out about films all the time now, from the crowdfunding stage to the distribution stage. Lots of people think that the big benefit of crowdfunding is not only that you get money for your project, but also that you have a built-in audience. Social media also puts a public face to the mentor-mentee relationships, which is really important now because one of the downsides of relying on crowdfunding is that you basically need an audience to buy into you before you create your content. So having ways for a public figure whose work is already widely respected to show public support for an upcoming filmmaker means that that filmmaker is going to have a much easier time getting funding on these crowdsourcing sites and getting audience, etc. So there's no study yet, like I said, of how all of this technology is impacting women in film. But we can look at recent independent filmmaking statistics to kind of see what's changing, because these are the films that are getting made through this technology. So this year, 3,293 films were submitted to Sundance. Of them, 773 were directed by women. That's 23.4%. Out of the 119 films that were accepted in Sundance, women directed 29% of those films. So not great numbers still, but about 6 times better than the Hollywood figures. So we're going in the right direction. But there's lots of things that still need to be disrupted. And like I said, tech can't provide an answer to all of them, but I am hoping that you guys will get inspired, build more platforms that can help other female content creators to address some of these issues. So a couple of ideas. One thing that really needs disrupting is the distribution model. Because right now, even though you can finance, you can produce, you can reach your audience without really relying on the traditional male-centric financing world, you can't distribute your movie, you can't get money for your movie without going back into that world. So to give you an idea, even the smallest of independent movies that you'll probably watch on Netflix or on TV or on Google Play, even the smallest one of these movies probably cost at least $100,000. But without going into a traditional distribution company, it's really hard for a filmmaker to get even half of that. So that means that their investors aren't getting paid, and it perpetuates the myth that people aren't paying money for female-driven content, which is not true. People are paying money, but people are paying money for things they can find. They're not paying money for movies they don't know exist. So I know tech can't fix this on its own, but the more platforms that are created for women to distribute their films and to collect payment for that distribution, that's the really important part, the more the traditional system is going to have to shift. And in that vein, we also don't want the film world to get too niche. We don't want a world where your future choices are all decided by an algorithm that is only looking at your past choices. We want a world where one day you can watch Wajda, which was a great foreign film last year about a little girl who's entering a bike competition. But then the next day you can turn around and watch an explosion bonanza, like White House Down, if you want to. Those are also fun. So we want to open our horizons. We want to get the most films out there. We don't want to trap everybody in individualized little boxes. Crowdfunding is also still incredibly difficult if you're not a celebrity, like Kristen Bell, and if you don't have an established audience. So most people end up raising their money from their own personal networks. So how can we build something that will allow upcoming female filmmakers to reach a wider group of people? Like, what can we build that won't rely so much on your current network, but will look at your network's network and that extended network and bring people from all of those places together? Finally, women are not the only ones that are underrepresented in the entertainment industry. Every other minority has equally low numbers or even lower. And it doesn't do much to just fight for equal representation for women filmmakers and forget about everybody else. So we need to really be thinking of solutions that will allow filmmakers of all genders, all races, all creeds, all sexual orientations to tell their stories. And only then will we have a culture that's truly reflective of who we are. Thank you, and if anyone has any questions, let me know. All right.
Last question. Sure. I really enjoyed your talk. It was interesting. So you're a filmmaker and you work for Google. All of these alternative models, I mean, are they really viable to make a living as an independent artist, or are you going to rely on some sort of patronage model like crowdfunding and that sort of thing?
Well, that's a really pertinent question. I mean, right now, most artists can't just make a living being artists, so everybody needs an alternate source of income. I do think that a patronage model is probably going to happen very soon, crowdfunding, but also organizations like film societies that give grants to artists and everything. I think we are going back to that world with any kind of independent art phenomenon, but it's hard. I mean, I don't sleep. That's how I do it.
Hey, super great talk. I really enjoyed listening to you. So my question, you talked a little about distribution, but would you recommend any portals online that we can go to currently find women directed and women-told stories that are in film or TV right now?
Yeah, definitely. So one that I mentioned was Seed and Spark. So that is a crowdfunding site, but they're also a distribution platform, and they are definitely focused only on women. But I would say also that any of the big kind of on-demand platforms will have a section probably that's like women filmmakers or something, that even if it's like Netflix is known for having famously funny, very specific categories that are targeted exactly to you. So I think it's easier to find female-driven content on these sites than it would be to go like to a actual physical store and get it on the shelf. There's also really great resources by a company called Women in Film, and that's a nonprofit that kind of highlights women in film. So they actually have a great catalog of films directed and produced by women or just about women's stories. And if you click on movies there, they'll tell you where you can buy them online, which is pretty cool. All right, well, thank you so much. Enjoy your lunch. Oh, one more? Okay.
It's a pretty simple question, but can you tell us about your film?
Oh, sure. So my film is called Manos Sucias, and we shot it in Colombia last year, and it's a narrative film. It's about the drug trade in Colombia. It's about two brothers that haven't spoken to each other in several years, and they, unbeknownst to each other, end up on the same drug run. And it just kind of takes a look at life on the lowest rung of the international drug trade and how it's really, they're not the people that are driving this at all, but they're the people whose lives are most negatively affected by it. April 17th.
Hi, I'm a developer, and I've also kind of worked on a few short film projects, mostly in San Francisco, and like a group that kind of encouraged everybody to do these projects for free, which is really great. Do you know of any groups like that in New York City that kind of encourages also like just women as well, just to do like directing, producing, create groups together?
Yeah, well, I know there is again, Women in Film, they have a branch in New York and in LA. There's also a really great group called Chicken and Egg Productions, and they're not a group per se, but they're a company that specializes in female-driven projects, and they, if you have an idea for a project, they're the people that you would take it to.
Can I also add one more thing? It's a little bit related to the last one. I wanted to say something. I'm kind of curious as to how the next generation, because I think I'm a little older than you, because the last speaker spoke about feeling not supported in technology and also obviously in film, we're not supported enough. I'm kind of, and it disappoints me a little bit to hear when women are so focused on finding men or trying to impress men and not feel show their inner nerd and strength, versus finding men that are very supportive and encouraging those men to be stronger and more confident in themselves to be able to accept strong women. And so I'm kind of wondering how people, maybe it's a group question really, are women still feeling like they have to really conform to this more feminine way so that we're accepted, versus being strong and finding these men and maybe I want to raise a next generation of, and have friends that raise the next generation of boys that can be really strong enough to accept strong women. So I'm just kind of curious about that. What is your experience?
Well, I definitely don't know if I can speak for all women. I mean, I think that's something that a lot of women struggle with. I see a lot of my friends struggling with it. I'm incredibly lucky that I married a man who lets me be my weird, nerdy, crazy self and sing on the sidewalks, and he doesn't care, and it's awesome. I think there are men like that. I mean, one thing I didn't mention is that my movie is directed by a man, in fact. So I'm here talking about women filmmakers, but I'm working on a movie that's written and directed by men. And they're both awesome, super sensitive guys, and I think those guys are out there, and I think that the women, not of your generation, I think the women of the generation above that are raising the guys today did a really good job. But I mean, there's always going to be assholes that don't support strong women, and I think we just need to stop giving them the time of day.
No, I agree. I had a really strong father that really supported me to do whatever I wanted, and he was a mathematician. He just helped me say, go do whatever you want. And my husband in the same way. So I'm kind of hoping everybody, I would love to support everybody that would want to find a man that's stronger versus you needing to feel like you have to be less. So anyway, I was just curious. Thank you.